Hi everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Is back talking about books, and today this is like a very anticipated thing for myself and for a lot of people who are well versed in this series. We are going to be talking about the finale, the final book in the Darkverse series. It's called The Syndicator. Did it come out this year? Did it come out at the end of last year? I don't remember. But anyway, we're going to be talking about it. I finally finished the series. I finally read it. If you haven't heard of the series or haven't watched my other YouTube videos on the first 3 books of the series, you can go watch that. I will link them below. I haven't done reviews on the entire series. I've only done it on the first 3 because those were my 3 favorites, but I wanted to make a dedicated video on the ending of the series. I put off reading this book for so long. I was just scared. I had heard a lot of things about it. I also had really high expectations, which is so bad to have such high expectations on a series like this, at a finale like this, but I did. I had high expectations, and I was just really scared to finish the series and to see where everything left off. This will be a spoiler review. I will be talking about specific plot points in the story. Long story short, how I can describe this ending is it felt incomplete. I also will preface this review and say that this might not be the best review that I've had. It might not be the most detailed review just because I read the rest of the series before this last book came out a year and a half ago. It's been a long time since I've familiarized myself with the characters in the books, that I understood the plot, what was going on. So reading the first 3, 4, 5 chapters, I was just remembering all of the characters, all of the character dynamics, all of the different plot points that we needed to understand before the finale. It wasn't really fresh off in my mind going into the last book, so I might have a lot of misinformation. Please correct me if I'm wrong about some stuff, about the plot of the book, about how the characters act, and the type of dynamics that they might have. Let's just get into it. We are talking about The Syndicator, the ending of the Darkverse series. Highly anticipated for me, for a lot of people. I saw in my comment sections talking about this series. People want to know what is up with this book. A lot of people are not reading it, or a lot of people are just curious as to how this series could possibly end. Because if you don't know anything about the Darkverse series, it is a series of dark romance, mafia books that follows a different couple in every book. But I think the main point that draws people into the story are 2 things. It's that these couples are dark romance couples, but you can tell that there's so much respect and so much love in these relationships, and you follow these relationships, the struggles that the characters go through. The characters are also really strong. You follow them and you fall in love with them because there's so much respect and so much appreciation for each other that you feel like it is a true romance. It doesn't feel insanely toxic, even though it is a dark romance, right? Even though there is murder, there is stalking, there is, I want to kill this girl, and then he ends up falling in love with her. It's true enemies to lovers. There's a lot of things like that, but you end up seeing the dynamics change, how the couples earn each other's respect and completely admire each other. That is why readers fall in love with the series. That's number 1. The second reason why readers fall in love with the series is because of the twists and turns in the plot. There are so many mysteries that when you go into it, there's so many plot points, so many family relations about people backstabbing each other. There's also a huge overarching mystery about who this underground trafficking ring is. It's rooted in so much mystery as to the big bad. Who is the big bad? Who is the syndicator? Who is the one pulling at all of the strings, causing ruckus in everybody's lives in the book? And because it's rooted in so much mystery, because in every single book ending you find out a little bit more about the relations between every person and how they relate to the big bad of the book, it makes you invested in the story. It makes you want to keep reading, and that's why this book was so highly anticipated. Because of all of the high expectations of the book, I think that was its biggest detriment, right? Nothing could really live up to the expectations of what everybody was gonna think unless it was planned from the beginning. And I really truly think that the author of these books writes beautifully, did an amazing job coming up with the twists and the turns in the plot. But I have an inkling and I have a feeling that she didn't know how she wanted to end the books and how she wanted to piece all of the puzzle pieces together into an ending. It wasn't this jaw-dropping, amazing thing that connected all of the stories together. It was just, I need to find some way to finish this series. Let me just put this out there. And it really did feel like that. It didn't feel cohesive. It felt incomplete. Instead of giving us an Attack on Titan type of ending where everything just clicked, everything came full circle, it gave us a Game of Thrones ending. Instead of giving a Breaking Bad type of jaw-dropping ending, it gave a Mockingjay Part 1 type of ending, meaning that it did not feel complete. It felt like a part 1. There's just so many unanswered questions that still are unanswered by the end of the series, and it just felt like such an abrupt end. Like they just wanted it to be over, and that was that. Reading this book felt like reading a novella. We got a lot of fluff. We got snippets of everybody's lives. All of the 4 couples that we learn throughout the series and meet throughout the series, it's just little snippets of their lives. It's just them having dinner together. It's them finally reuniting. Nothing feels whole. It also, another way I described it was like, it felt like the ending of Lost. Like Lost was rooted in so much mystery, and when you have so much mystery like that and you don't know how it's gonna end, you don't know how you're gonna connect all of the pieces together, it just doesn't feel like it will ever live up to the hype. I came into this book knowing that, and that's why I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars, because I think I would have disliked it a lot more if I had those high expectations, but because I came into it knowing that this is gonna be a little bit disappointing, I walked away being okay with that. And let's go into what I felt as I was reading the book. Literally nothing happens. Nothing happens. 90 pages in, okay? It's a 400-page book, 90 pages in. I cannot tell you one thing that happened. One significant thing that happened, nothing happens. We get into little snippets of each of the couple's lives, and that's it. Like, literally nothing happens. I could not explain one plot point that happens. Yeah, I'm literally trying to think, and I cannot think about anything that happened. And then after 90 pages in, they finally meet Tristan's sister. This is a big reunion everyone's talking about. Lila was a character that we met in the last book. She is Tristan's long-lost sister. And Tristan and Lila have this big reunion where both of them are crying, and this finally happens like a quarter of the way, like 100, 200 pages into the book. I'm like, finally, something's happening. They're finally meeting, right? They meet. It's this huge, big reunion, and I think I've seen a lot of discourse about like Tristan didn't feel like Tristan in this book. We got into this series with the Predator, with the Reaper, and you fall in love with Tristan Morano. You fall in love with Tristan's demeanor and how he was. When you meet Tristan in this book, a lot of people were saying, the discourse was that Tristan didn't feel like Tristan, that he was so out of character and he was just a bystander and he didn't really do anything, which I will agree that he didn't really do much Tristan-esque things in this, but I will disagree that I didn't absolutely hate his character. I actually felt that having this little reunion, finally seeing his sister and meeting his sister after years and years and years of searching for her, and him finally showing some emotion, finally crying, being the first time that Tristan ever says I love you is to his sister, and getting that sort of relief. All of this tension has built his whole life. All this anger, this grudge was held inside of him, and all he does in the first half of this book is cry. He's just crying and crying and crying, and all Morana does is just stand next to him and support him. I don't think that that's the most horrible projection in his character development. I actually think that's a really nice thing in a way. Like, he really develops as a character. He really comes into himself and learns to open up, to talk more, to get to know people more, and it's a really insightful way to see how he can grow, right? It might seem out of character, but I feel like that aspect of it is really endearing, and I really liked that people were really mad about. I didn't really see an issue with that. It feels like a growth for him. I got this quote. It says, Tristan had always been a blank slate. One of the reasons Dante truly enjoyed provoking a reaction out of him. But the Tristan who stood before him then wasn't a man who didn't give a fuck about the world. It was a boy who made a mistake and paid an unreasonable price for it. And seeing him like that, seeing him cry, made Dante's own eyes burn. The cold predator of the mob weeping like a boy. So that's kind of how Tristan is throughout the book. And then you find out Zafir is pregnant. Okay, yay, happy, good for you. But nothing else happens after that with her. Now 60% of the way through the book. And then we proceed to learn nothing about the plot, about the syndicate, about who the syndicate is, what their motivations are. Nothing. 60% of the way through the book. We don't have time, you guys. This is 60% of the way through the finale. We get smut chapter of Marana and Tristan. Fine, great. We love a little smut chapter. The next chapter after that, we get a smut chapter of Amara and Dante. Okay, we don't have time here, people. Why are we using chapter after chapter after chapter of smut? It literally came in a row. They went 4 chapters for the 4 couples doing smut after smut after smut. I love smut just as much as the next girl, okay? I love reading it. I also really like the way that this author writes smut. But to have chapter after chapter after chapter being smut is really boring to read. No one wants to read chapter after chapter after chapter. Like, if they wanted to read 4 consecutive chapters of smut without any plot going on, they would go on AO3 and look up a one-shot or look up some fanfic or read a little tiny novella. People do not, in my personal opinion, want to read smut back to back like that with 4 different couples. If you're gonna have smut, you gotta have it throughout the story, because that's the only time in the entire book that there is those kind of intimate scenes. That's the only time in the entire book. I say this on my channel a lot. That is the one thing I hate with smut. When it comes to smut in a book, I love it. The one thing I hate about smut is when it doesn't move the plot forward, or when it feels like you can just take that scene out and it leaves nothing to the story. It doesn't make the 2 characters who are doing those intimate things get closer to each other. You don't learn anything about them. It doesn't feel special to them. It could be any character copy and pasted into the scene. And that is exactly the type of smut that we got. And I really did not like that. I skimmed it. I actually skipped it, I think, because I was just like, I love smut, okay? I can't. Like, I can't be doing this, and we cannot be doing this when there's only 40% of the story to go through. We only have 40% of the book left. We don't know anything about the syndicate. We don't know, like, what? I'm literally speechless. Like, I just don't understand. We don't have time for this, people. We need answers. I just wish, if you're gonna have that, at least space it out. It felt like the author was just being like, here, damn. You want your smut? Here, damn. That's really what it felt like. It felt so redundant. It was very uninteresting. That part especially. Tristan in this book is just crying and crying and crying, right? And I found it really funny personally reading it, because I remember thinking back to my first review on The Predator. I kept talking about Tristan is just staring and staring and staring. Like, he's staring Marana with his orbs of eyes, you know, like his big, are they blue? Does he have like blue eyes? Like his big blue orbs, or his big brown onyx orb. This time he's just crying and crying and crying. Like, instead of staring and staring and staring, he's crying and crying and crying. I just found it really funny and ironic, and it's like a full circle moment. And then we get further into the book. We're like 75% of the way through the book. Everyone finally finds out that Lila and the Shadow Man are together and they are married. This is when I realized that most of this book, the reason why I didn't really like it, or I didn't really vibe with it, is because it's all tell and no show. It's everyone finding out a secret, but also they're not even revealing all of the secrets. They're just finding out through talk. They're talking about like, oh yeah, the Shadow Man is my husband, but there's no action put behind that. The only action we get was the actual reunion between Lila and Tristan, between brother and sister. That was the only sort of action I felt throughout the entire book. For example, the reason how I feel it's all tell and don't show is they tell us all the way towards the end of the book, we're like 80% of the way through the book now, that Vinny, Amara's really close friends, died. He died infiltrating the syndicate, and he died trying to save another girl that he loved. Instead of actually following along with his story and maybe Amara checking in with him, they just say it. Oh, we killed one of Maroni's men and he died trying to save another girl. I wish we kind of saw some of that. I wish we could get a whole nother book about Vinny and this other girl that he ran away with. I wish we could get even a little backstory of even Dante on a call with Vinny or Amara on a call with Vinny. They just drop the bomb there. Like something so wholly interesting, like Vinny and this girl's story didn't happen. Or we didn't see the syndicator. The syndicator himself had his own chapters. In his chapter, he talks about how he killed Vinny and this other girl, but he talks about it. I wish that he showed it. I wish we got a chapter where he finds out that Vinny infiltrated the syndicate and we see the power of the syndicator and we see him send his men and we see the action scene where Vinny dies and we actually witness Vinny die. And how heart-wrenching would that be to see it happen, unfold before us and see the power of the syndicator. I feel like that would have been way more intense and way more emotionally wrought. Instead, we get a little, oh yeah, Vinny's dead. We're gonna have a funeral for him next week. And that's all we get. I need to reinvest myself in who Vinny is. Who is this guy? Why is Amara so distraught that he died? Like, what was his importance? Like, I needed all of that, and we just got none of the action. Okay? And then, especially towards the end, it's really all tell and don't show because Marana sees Dane for himself, right? Marana goes and sees Dane, who is the Shadow Man. Then she gets kidnapped. But we don't even really see the scene where she gets kidnapped. It's like a cut to black and then she's tied up hanging. They show like a tiny snippet of, oh yeah, I was driving and I don't even know when they drugged me and then I woke up and I'm in this room. We get like the smallest description of a guy, like a bigger guy, like pulling her out of her car. And then she's like tied up in this warehouse. And then all of a sudden, Tristan and Lila are there. I wanted to see them get the phone call that Marana was kidnapped. I wanted to see them come there themselves. All of the action was literally just told to us. They just showed up. And I'm like, how did Lila and Tristan get here? And then they give a little description about how Lila got this little text message that Marana was kidnapped and they said, come here alone. I'm like, can we see their version of events? Can we see what happened from their side? All of the good action things literally was just left out of this book. Then they bring up this entirely new plot point about how Marana and Lila and all these little girls, the entire series are talking about how these little girls got kidnapped, like these little babies got kidnapped, and the entire series we're thinking that they got kidnapped because they wanted to be trafficked. Little did they know, it wasn't trafficking. It was because they were doing experiments on these babies. This project was called Project Ouroboros or something. They kidnapped these babies not to sell them, but to test them for experiments. They explained this plot point all the way at the very end, and then they never go into depth as to their motivations, as to what this project is, why it exists, why these babies. They just really gotta elaborate for real. For real, they gotta elaborate because I was so confused. The entire series, the syndicate felt like the biggest bad that there was. It felt so big and so bad, it was impossible to destroy. It was impossible to find out who was at the top, who was the head. And then Dane destroys them, a little fire. Like he just finds the head of the syndicate who ends up being his sperm donor daddy and burns them all in a fire. And then he becomes the head of the syndicate. And I'm like, you made the syndicate and the syndicator feel like the biggest bad of them all. Like you could never take the head down. If one head grows, two more grows out, and it's just impossible to destroy this huge underworld. And then he kills them all in one go at the very end of the book. It didn't feel that hard. This is why I was saying, and I think I saw this on a Goodreads review, that it felt like Game of Thrones Season 8 because they made the White Walkers in Season 8 of Game of Thrones feel like the biggest, most horrible thing. You could never kill these guys, these White Walkers, and then they just kill them real quick. A little stab to the heart. And that's what it felt like here. It's like you made the syndicator and the syndicate feel like this horrible thing, and then the syndicator just died instantly. Dane just shows up to where the syndicator is, who ends up being his daddy, and the syndicator's all happy. And we also don't know this syndicator. Okay, let's talk about the syndicator, because the syndicator is literally just some, I think he's white. Like, I'm just gonna call him like some random white guy. The syndicator is just a rando. We don't know him. We know nothing about him. We know nothing about his motivations. We don't even know where he started, how he started this underground organization, drugs and trafficking and all of this stuff. We don't know why he's this horrible person. We know absolutely nothing about him, and we do not give a about him. We don't even know his name, okay? At the grand scheme of things, it's fine. Like, it's okay to have kind of a sort of anonymous figure be the big bad. It was so underwhelming in the way that you knew that Dane, you hyped up this guy, the syndicator, to be a horrible, horrible person. Train of thought here, but I really like the idea that at the grand scheme of things, big bad organizations, this like horrible evil man is just a man at the end of the day. And that I wish that they could build him up to be this big, big, bad, horrible person, and then maybe end, he's just a pathetic loser, and he's just this pathetic guy, and he's just human, and Dane kills him instantly. I wish we could have gotten a little bit of a backstory about like, they're building up this guy, he's so threatening, kind of like Oz. Oz is this bigger than life threatening being. Like, he doesn't even feel like a real person, like a real being, and then you meet him and he's just some guy. I think that that would be so significant, a big message as to evilness is everywhere. Evilness is just the guy on the street. A random guy on the street. It surrounds us, it's everywhere, and it could be anybody, right? I think that that could have been an amazing message, and I wish we got more of who the syndicator was, even what the syndicate was and their motivations, and what all of these different entities, what each couple had to do with the story at hand, right? How they were involved in this organization. It felt incomplete. And it felt like I didn't really care about how the story ended by the end. Killed him in an instant and on fire. Didn't really seem that hard for him. The death of the head of the syndicate left a lot of unanswered questions. He talked about Dane, how Dane was basically his son. He was the sperm donor, and Dane was part of the experiments that the syndicate did because the syndicator wanted a worthy opponent, and that all of these little babies they were kidnapping were for the Ouroboros experiment, for the projects, because he wanted a worthy opponent. Why? What do you mean? Why? What is the end game here? Wanted a worthy opponent, but we don't get a full picture as to your motivation. Who just wakes up one day and is just like, let me just experiment on some babies, because are you trying to make soldiers? Like, they didn't even explain, like, were they trying to make soldiers to grow up in this mafia and be able to have stronger babies so that they could work for the syndicate and have these like strong kids grow up, become their slaves? They didn't explain any of that. They didn't explain why they wanted these projects. They didn't explain why they were experimenting on these kids. We didn't really get a full picture, and maybe I missed it. Maybe they did explain it and I just missed it. After the syndicator dies, they just explain away everything else in epilogues. They say that Dane is the head of the syndicate. They don't explain how he even got to be the head of the syndicate. He just is now. They didn't explain how everybody who was under him once the head died, did they just let Dane be the head of the syndicate? There was no meeting or board meeting. Like, they just let him be the head, I guess. Sorry for my little ramble. I told you this was gonna be a really messy review. I just left this book with more questions than answers. Do I regret reading the series as a whole? No. I absolutely stayed for the romance. I stayed for the mystery, and although the plot and the mystery didn't really pan out perfectly, I will still cherish and love these couples. The first 3 books were some of my favorite books of all time, and that romance was some of my favorite romance of all time. I also think that the plot and the twists and the turns were so good. Even though this series didn't end on a high note, just because of the way it ended, I wouldn't regret reading the whole thing. I could get away with saying the plot, the mystery is not gonna pan out the way that anybody is gonna think. You might be disappointed. I think most people would probably be disappointed, and there was absolutely no action by the end of the series, and we don't really get answers to questions, but I think it's kind of worth it just because of how much I loved the first 3 books. If you're not thinking about the plot as much and thinking about the answers to the plot, the couples itself are really sweet and cute, and seeing them get their happy ending is a really nice touch on top. I think the author had a lot of work to do answering the mysteries there, and by the end she was just like, fuck it, I don't care. I'm just gonna finish this book series and then have all of the couples live happily ever after and all have babies. I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. It was not my favorite of all time at all. It felt very incomplete. It honestly felt like part 1 to a two-parter movie. Kind of like Breaking Dawn Part 1, Mockingjay Part 1, Harry Potter, Deathly Hallows Part 1. Not much really happens and it felt like a build-up. And then an entirely second part or second book should have come out with just the last few chapters, and that's where they really truly closed everything off. But nothing happened in the book. I can tell you 2 things that happened in the book, and that's the only 2 things that happened. Oh, 3. My bad, 3. Number 1, the family reunion. Tristan and Lila finally meet after years and years and years of being apart. Number 2, they all fuck chapter after chapter after chapter in the middle of the book. And then number 3, they kill the syndicator in the snap of fingers. And that's it. This whole book was just fluff. But if you don't want to read it, I honestly don't think you're missing out on much. If you just want to get the plot points, I literally just told you everything that happened. Read the first 3, 4, 5 books. Lovely, lovely books. And then come up to your own conclusion. Use your own imagination, your own headcanon as to how the series ends. Yeah, that's just my personal opinion. That's just my thoughts. I don't know if that's controversial or not. I haven't really gotten too much of what other people have thought about this series. I just wanted to kind of go into it with my eyes only, and it really felt like a novella. I thought I was reading a novella. Please, 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 if you've read this series, if you read this last book, let me know your thoughts down below. I give it a 2 out of 5 stars. I love you guys so much, and I will catch you in the next one.